Hello, Uganda. Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hotseat on 933 KFM. I welcome you, our listeners across this country and beyond. And so tonight we have a full house. The Wednesday panel is constituted today. And let me begin by introducing them. I have Senior Presidential Advisor, Mr. Moses Byaruhyanga. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Good evening.
Good evening, Patrick, my colleagues in the studio, and our listeners out there.
We have from UMI, Professor Gerald Karyeija. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Good evening.
Pleasure to be here. Good evening to all.
And also with us, the man from Untungamo, I always call him the best of Untungamo, Mr. Godber Tumushabe from the Great... I was actually provoking you to hear that. And I was right on point. From the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies, Mr. Godber Tumushabe, thank you so much for joining us.
A great pleasure to be here, back with colleagues, and good evening, our listeners.
And when you are away, we sympathize with you, Godber, for the passing on of your dear dad.
Yeah.
And it's a loss, but we also know you celebrated the life of a great man who has impacted the lives of many people, but also, moving on at almost 90 is something to celebrate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There was a lot of celebration. We lost our dad. He was a very, very consequential man. I always describe him as an intellectual. Intellectual in the sense that these are people who do things that benefit both themselves and society. So Mzee was just an incredible person in the sense that he was a very truthful person, very open. Actually, when he would take his one too many, he used to say for him he talks openly. Trying to say he talks openly.
You need to start taking one too many.
You mean he doesn't take openly?
Yeah, and so he would say, and so his nickname in the village became Openero. So that's how he was being known in the village. And we were very, very humbled by the messages of condolences. The people gave us a lot of financial support to enable us to celebrate the life of this great man. I think at the burial on the 4th of May, we had over 10,000 people.
That's really something to show.
No, it was quite incredible, and really we are very, very grateful to everybody, our friends, our relatives, who joined in the celebration and to enable us send away our father in such a dignified manner.
May his soul rest in peace. Okay, let me begin with you, Professor.
So you take one too few.
No, one too few.
You need to pick from Mzee.
I should have mentioned that Mzee was married to two wives.
Okay.
So I have two mothers. He produced 20 of us. And 14 of us are still alive and really working together. A very, very unified family.
And how many of us?
The beauty of people of their generation. The beauty of the people of their generation.
Yeah.
They can have two mothers or two wives, but they're so happily staying together. Yeah. And then you find the likes of us. You have one, and then you have two kids, but you are struggling. Anyway.
Maybe just for the moment, I was also sharing. In our speech, we were sharing with the people that we are probably the one family where our father had his two wives in one house for most of our young life.
Wow.
We were living in the same house. One of the mothers living in one bedroom, the other mother living in another bedroom, and two bedrooms for the children, and we were able to live happy, and we've been happy. We are happy. We are a very, very united family, and we really thank God for that.
Are you planning to try out the two-bedroom thing? Okay.
No, the times have changed. Patrick. Times have changed.
All right. Yeah. People in East Africa, our leaders in East Africa, I think are gathering in Nairobi, trying to look for peace for the region, peace in South Sudan, peace, of course, in the Democratic Republic of Congo is needed. Peace in Somalia has been eluding that country for quite some time. In our own country, we're always having our episodes of ups and downs. But really, in 2024, let me also take it to you, Godber, because you're so much interested about the region and the Great Lakes region. What is the missing link for the countries in the Great Lakes region to have peace and stability that is long term?
I think I can just mention three things that combine to create our perpetual instability in this region. One is that this is a region of interest globally. That it's a region that is that is immensely endowed with natural resources of all forms, strategic minerals, petroleum, immense wood resources, biodiversity. You may want to know that the Albertine Graben is one of the regions in the world with the highest species endemism. These are endemic species, are those species that you'll find in only particular places. You can't even go and replicate them somewhere. So there is that whole aspect of that. These are natural resources. There is immense geopolitical competition over these resources. The second one is that we don't have a regional power, the big brother. So most of the regions that have witnessed some sense of stability, there's always a big brother who is able to say, no, you can't do this. You have to. You're able to contain certain excesses. Now in this region, you have all the kinds of people, the leaders, the countries we have. They're all small countries, just developing, very small economies, very limited money. Many of them dependent on foreign funding. And I think I always argue that if it was not for the misrule of Moi in Kenya, Kenya could have emerged as the regional superpower within this region, and I think we missed it. The third one is the leaders. I don't think that this region has had the leadership that is selfless in trying to push a unified agenda of regional peace and stability. So you have leaders who have been bickering with each other all the time. This one is fighting with the other one. This one is quarreling with the other one. So there is always there has developed a lot of mutual suspicions among the leaders in the region. Now, for the region, we are also unlucky because I keep on telling people that this region has changed fundamentally over the last almost more than 2 decades. But it has 2 constants that will determine the direction, the course of events. And the 2 constants are President Museveni and President Kagame. As long as these 2 are here and they have mutual suspicion of each other. Sometimes they pretend they are friends, and yet there is evidence that they can't resolve their personal differences, or these two players they are key players because they have been around.
But you're talking about the lack of leadership or regional power. But really, why don't you also give credit where credit is due? For example, to your own or our own, if I may use that word. If it wasn't for President Yoweri Museveni, maybe it would be a different game in Somalia now.
But you see,
even in South Sudan.
In South Sudan, it would be a different game because when Riek Machar and Salva Kiir were at each other's throat, I understand it was Uganda and the Ugandan military.
South Sudan, because the South Sudan, Riek Machar and Salva Kiir, these are you can even call them gunmen. They have fought, they have been fighting, and so Uganda is there just to separate them. Maybe it is better for them to fight each other, and whoever is the victor can be able to establish law and order there. So all that Uganda has done is to prolong the suffering of the South Sudanese people.
So that somebody should have a knockout punch.
Yeah. So as far as I'm concerned, this region, the instability has become perpetual. Each one of these countries, Uganda has done a commendable job. I mean, we have to congratulate our government and our military for helping. Even in the villages when we were fighting Patrick, there will always be the big brother who would come and say, stop here. Then when you go away, they start fighting. That is not the kind of peace that we are looking for.
Okay. Yeah. Let me come to senior presidential advisor. Many times, peace efforts in Nairobi, peace efforts in Lusaka, the region, if you look at it from years back, we are always having these episodes of violence, of instability. From your own point of view, what is missing and how do we need to handle these issues in our region?
First of all, I want to disagree a bit with Godber. on the big brother mentality, because if you look at Ukraine, Russia, which is an international matter now, it's where the big brothers. How come we are in the second year of the war? And you don't know when it will end and how. Will it end by one saying I'm victorious? Will it end on table? I don't know. Go to the Palestine, Israel, where the big brothers, that war has been on for I can recall. Now it is at the intensity. So when Russia, what did I say, acquisition Crimea, where were the big brothers? So it's not as easy that in the region, if there's a big brother, he will calm you down. At the end of the day, if you look at the part of the problem in Africa, President Museveni has been explaining it, is the politics of tribe, the politics of identity. If you look at South Sudan, the issues between the Nua, the Dinka, and the others, those 2 or 3 major tribes. Now, when you go to the structure of the security forces, which are supposed to be, you see, the army is supposed to be an instrument of state to bring, to order everyone. But if the army is based on where somebody is born and maybe which religion you go to, then that will be a weak state. You see, in political science, there are states, there are governments, there are countries. What is important in all these denominations is the state. And one of the pillars of the state is a strong security system which can hold everybody together. And that's where we are lacking. Even if when you look at after even independence, the coups which were now in many African countries, Uganda inclusive, Nigeria, almost many countries have had coups. I think the ones which haven't had coups are fewer than the ones which have had coups, if you did some research. And why were there? Because most of those colonial armies were based on politics of identity, tribe, and so forth. They don't look at when Godber is coming from Ntungamo, most of them coming from Bunyoro. We have our common interest since we're all in Uganda, because at the end of the day, if Godber says, let me look for my people from Ntungamo. But if Godber is selling coffee, everybody in Ntungamo grows coffee. Maybe, me in Kampala, I may not be growing coffee, so he needs me more than at the same level he will need his neighbor in Ntungamo, because at the end of the day he needs to sell what he has produced.
Okay, gentlemen, your submissions have unusually been longer than usual. So that's what we're going to take a break before Professor gives us. But the Professor has listened to people. It's also very good for the Professor to listen.
It's going to mark us.
So when you come back, it's going to be serious marking from the Professor. We'll be right back.
The hottest debate on all relevant topics live on KFM's Hot Seat tonight. KFM's Hot Seat covers all the relevant topics every weekday 7 to 8 p.m. KFM's Hot Seat. Hot Seat. Hear the real story behind the story. Coming right at you. Only on 933 KFM.
Welcome back to 933 KFM, and this is the Hot Seat. My name is Patrick Kamara. My guest this evening, Professor Gerald Karyeija from Uganda Management Institute, Godber Tumushabe from the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies, and Senior Presidential Advisor Moses Byaruhyanga. Before we took a break, Godber and Moses had made their submission on the instability that we keep seeing in the East African, the Great Lakes region. But that one thing that stood out really, and I want to agree with Moses, is the issue of politics of identity. You know, it is in Sudan, it's in Uganda, it's in Congo, it's in Rwanda.
Uganda is seduced now.
Professor, what do you make of these two submissions?
It's partly correct as an explanation, though it doesn't give the whole picture. I'm more persuaded by the capability of the state and also the economic advancement of a country. Because you see, one of the countries in East Africa which practices practical politics of identity is Kenya, and it has been less fragile. in terms of exposition to war and the internal strife. Though at a political level, they have so many challenges. So yes, a part of the explanation could be politics of identity, but also it's because we still have weak states, both in terms of the capacity of the military, but also in the capacity of the civil services and the correctional services and the judicial and so forth. The second one is the economy and the distribution of wealth. The more you have a strong economy, the less the tendency to internally destroy. Usually the destruction is more of foreign than internal, because many people have a lot to protect, and they work towards protecting the wealth that they've developed, and they want to become better as a people. So I think that is also part of the explanation. But also, you will notice that the foundation upon which some of these conflicts are based is because of the fluidity in terms of the security system. There is a lot of proliferation of arms. There is a lot of benefit outside the formal sector. People root from Eritrea, they invest in Uganda. People root from Uganda, they invest in Congo, and that kind of thing. But ultimately, until there is strong state capacity and better economies, then we shall have less conflict. Two, perpetuation, the creation of some of these states has been driven also by military or conquest views, like Southern Sudan. If you see the skirmishes in Somalia, the fights in Eritrea, and it's no longer just military power that leads to strength of leadership and political cohesion, but also military power. Lastly, the question of domestic political settlement. I think that I wouldn't want to see Southern Sudan have the different factions fight until one is vanquished and another one wins. Most of these things are about interests, whether the interests are manifesting themselves in terms of identity. Actually, Uganda did a political settlement by looking at the politics of identity and responding with a political settlement that tries to manage that. For example, the creation of constituencies, the creation of districts, the creation of kingdoms, the creation of balancing when you are setting up a cabinet and so on and so forth. So I think there is need for increased engagement. And when we look at the picture in Southern Sudan, for example, even now as they are in Nairobi, the biggest audience are donors and other people. And the biggest target are donors and other presidents. And Kiel pleading to his colleagues that, wait a minute, I'm in trouble. So until you engage as much as possible the different interests, whether they are tribal formations or armed groups, I would want to borrow the Ugandan political settlement, though eventually it becomes so costly. Like now we are almost collapsing on the shoulders of that settlement. But at least it has moved us a mile.
Godber, I'll give it to Uganda once more, because when you look at Uganda, we are the biggest recipient of refugees than anywhere else in Africa. I'm told we're number 3 on the globe. If you look at all countries around us, apart maybe from Tanzania and Kenya, they are all coming to Uganda to look for solace, economic, political, whatever refugees. And yet Ugandans are not going to Congo because they're running away, or going to Ethiopia, or going to Eritrea or Somalia because they're running out of this country. So probably if we put our act together, we could be the regional power that could glue this region together more than it is already doing.
First of all, let me distinguish between what Moses said and what we're discussing. And Moses made references to Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is a completely different war, because this is a war between Russia and Ukraine, and with the other world powers participating, most of them on the part of Ukraine. So the war in Ukraine is completely different from what is in Somalia, what is in South Sudan, what is in DRC, what is in Burundi, because for most of the countries in the region, the conflicts are actually internal. There are armed groups within the country that are fighting each other. Basically, I always say we've been killing each other all through and through, including here in Uganda. Those are the wars that we have fought. I think the only time we've had to fight an external war has been when Tanzania invaded us to fight Idi Amin. So that's point number one. Point number two, that Uganda and many and other countries within the region, they have the opportunity. They have the opportunity to really make progress, in the sense that one of the issues that people normally try to look at and say a state is based on a strong military. I think the strong military is one of the pillars of a strong state. So you have to look at the other institutions of state. So those institutions could be the judicial system that deal with the internal contradictions and conflicts and differences among people on the one hand, but also conflicts between people and the state. Do you have a credible, respectable judicial system that is able to resolve differences, and therefore people don't have to resort to going out to the bush to fight? So that's another pillar of the institution of the state. Another important institution of the state is the civil society, the citizenry, the citizen of a country. Do they feel like they are citizens, or they are actually subjects? Because you see, countries like...
And how do you diagnose Uganda?
No, Uganda is a country that is actually going into a conflict phase, because you have a regime that has suppressed dissent, that is building an economy that is excluding. So in other words, you have many years of growth, but many people are excluded from the growth, and you can feel the tensions. Some of them, you can see them being manifested in like these traders protests and whatever. These are important feelers in terms of how the civil society, how the citizenry feel. If you don't have an active, civic, competent citizenry, you are building conditions for conflict. Actually, the increasing cases of mob violence, the lawlessness you see on the streets, the borders, and all these motorists that drive on the pavement, those are conditions of state failure, by the way. So in other words, in the event that you don't have a military that can be used to oppress and suppress dissent, you can easily...
Is a higher civic competence good for the sitting government in Uganda today?
No, not for the sitting government, but if the government wanted to build a strong state that has an impact on the region, then it would have to be interested in building social cohesion, political cohesion, economic cohesion. They would be investing in that. But at the moment, I don't think that I asked that question to you.
I asked that question to you so that when I come to Moses, I may also ask whether you would agree that it would be of a disadvantage to have a vibrant citizenry in Uganda and disadvantage to the NRM government.
Why would it be?
Because that would be a threat.
Why would it?
If I'm reading Godber right.
No, Godber is always wrong on NRM. That one.
No, I was not talking about NRM. I was talking about Uganda.
Godber is always wrong. That one doesn't surprise me. So that one will be a problem. First of all, you see, Godber sometimes in trying to find fault in NRM, you end up contradicting yourself if you look at the matters you are talking about in a more comprehensive way, or in a comparative. You see, when I was doing political science, I studied comparative politics. You are talking about traders' protests as part of it's lack of a strong civic state. That's what, if I got you right. But recently I've been watching protests in American universities. Would you say the United States of America has a weak civil society system? I don't know. But that's why the contradictions I see. here you are saying the government is against dissent or freedom of expression, if I get you well. But you were here on radio expressing your different opinion against the government side, and it's normal. So that's why I'm contradicting yourself in trying to find fault in NRM. But for me, I agree with Gerald when he says I had said about building a strong security system, especially the army, based on competence, not where you come from, politics of identity. Of course, is followed by a strong economic system. Because if somebody from the side South of Sudan, he has to sell something to the other person on the other side. You see, the economics shapes you. As the president would always give the example of the late Mr. Murwana. I said, Mr. Murwana, when he was making batteries, and the company is still making batteries, he was interested to sell a battery to everybody in Uganda, even beyond. So not only is he looking at Uganda, but he would look even at East Africa to sell their commodities there. So when people are in business, they realize that where I come from is not a big issue. In any case, it will be small if you want to sell them anything. So if the entire country is integrated economically, you realize that the issue of who comes from where becomes...
So you're talking about the politics of interest that President Museveni has been preaching for quite some time.
Yes. They're important in building a strong state. Now, the challenge now countries like South Sudan will be having, much as they have not yet built a strong army based on nationalism or patriotism, no politics of identity, of course they can learn from Uganda. When NRM took over, it had peace talks with different fighting groups, including NRA at the end, and many of them were absorbed into NRA, took in ranks and so on and so forth. So what would be difficult for the protagonist groups in South Sudan to integrate and be under one leadership? They are all South Sudanese anyway. So none is coming from out. They are all internal. The same would happen in Congo. Those whom you are fighting. But if somebody says, I cannot talk to those people, then that's a problem. But for us here, we have been talking to anyone, including Kony, who was killing people in the north. But there was amnesty. Whoever had committed a crime, we said, the local people said, let's forgive them for what they committed, but we want them back. That's the conciliation.
Okay.
So it is important for South Sudan, for Congo, for any other conflict areas in our region to accept amnesty, to accept integration of all the fighting groups into one government or army, and train it to look at the national interests as opposed to where they come from.
Okay. Professor Karyeija, what really do you think could be the third force in terms of, you talked earlier about the interest of the international community, especially the Caucasian guys who always have interest here. Could they be the ones really behind? Today I was listening to something that is going on WhatsApp, whereby the parliament in UK is actually discussing Uganda.
Discussing Uganda.
And I'm wondering, a sovereign state, and they're talking about us. In fact, me, I was angry. Why are they so bothered? And they're saying there's a young man called Gerald Karyeija who needs to be, yes, he's a great friend of mine. I know he does a good job. But should the UK parliament be talking about us?
What do they want them to talk about if it's not about their interests?
Yeah.
So they could be, they have a hand.
Why shouldn't they talk about you?
You see, nations develop by defining their values, promoting their values, and protecting their values. And many of these Western European countries, their values are largely ingrained in capitalism, the pursuit of capital. And one of the tools to promote capital is the idea of democracy, which shapes a value system that promotes capital. Because the ideal of liberal democracy is pursue your happiness your own way, as long as you don't interfere with the interests of others. So I wouldn't be surprised to have the EU or any other parliament discuss us for as long as they feel that they have some legitimate interest either being protected or being undermined. After all, they would wish us to be like them. But so that wouldn't surprise me, because
they would wish us to be under them.
Instead,
like them.
We should also be able to concretize our interests,
Yes.
promote them,
Yes.
and protect them.
And aggressively.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think not only, even before we go there, we can begin here. You talked about the national refugee policy. Actually, for now, it is still a practice. I've just drafted the first ever national refugee policy for Uganda.
You have
just drafted.
You had that?
Yes.
He has just drafted.
Yeah, it is under validation.
We're talking somebody very legit, my friend, up there.
Yeah, but the point I wanted to bring out is that, or maybe the next segment I can say.
Okay, my producer wants us to take a break.
KFM's Hot Seat. It's hot, it's live, provocative, and digs deep into the issues.
933 KFM.
The hottest debate on all relevant topics, live on KFM's Hot Seat tonight. KFM's Hot Seat covers all the relevant topics every weekday, 7 to 8 p.m.
Welcome back to 933 KFM, and this is the Hot Seat. Before we took a break, Professor just wanted to tell us briefly about the refugee policy, and then somehow the producer decided to take a break.
Yeah, among other things, the critical thing about the Ugandan refugees policy is that, one, when refugees come here, we're one of the few who offer them land and liberty to work and earn money. So even countries which claim to be so libertarian do not have such liberties to refugees. But two, that has also created tension, especially now that donors want to leave certain things which they were doing to the refugees, because some refugees were seen to be living in a better state than the locals, and in some districts actually even they are more than the locals, like Ajumana and elsewhere. But I was relating it to the question of interests. I think it has also been critical for Uganda to learn that other than living together as Ugandans in cohesion, it's also critical to promote the ideal of Pan-Africanism. And that I go again on the question of the African Union. I think the level of institutionalization of African Union values is largely hypocritical by a number of nations, and that also tells why a number of nations cannot sort even their domestic challenges, and yet they claim to subscribe to the African Union. So the pretense amongst African political elite and leaders on the pursuit of the African Union ideals should stop. Otherwise the Agenda 2063 cannot be achieved.
but one thing I'm picking from the three of you is that the issue of institutions. Some maybe countries are stable because they have strong institutions. But of course, I can imagine Godber and Moses, you disagree on whether the institutions we have are strong or not. But who Godber FM who says that our institutions are not strong?
No,
we have a constitution. It depends also which institutions you're talking about.
So
we have a strong military institution.
For Uganda, what are the institutions actually that we are talking about? One is that you can look at the government in terms of the three arms of government or the state. So they are institutions of the executive. So the presidency and the executive agencies that go around them, which is the statutory agencies, the military, the police, the prisons, they are all under the executive. So you can pick in all these institutions the presidency. Is it a strong institution in Uganda? As far as I'm concerned, we have a rife president who is now almost trying to turn into a monarch. Does that present a strong presidency institution? You have a military. For long, we had thought that actually the UPDF was like one solid institution. I think for me, the fact that Muhoozi Kainerugaba, a foster general, son of the president, turns out and starts doing things that are contrary to the constitution, and they are in violation of the Ugandan constitution and against the UPDF Act. And neither the military leadership nor the commander-in-chief, who is his father, is able to discipline him. Tells you how weak the institution itself can be. You go to the Uganda police. I go to Uganda police and look at all these police stations I've been to. There's my local police station in Ntinda. I have been in Kajansi police station recently, one of the big ones, and you see how the place completely looks rotten. So you feel like are these the institutions that we are talking about that are strong? So you can go to the parliament now, which is the legislature. That's the legislative arm. Do we still have a parliament when you look at all the harabaru that has gone on with the speaker being accused of corruption and now being sanctioned by different governments? Is that the institution of parliament that we are saying, oh, this is a strong institution? Then you go to the judiciary and look at the cases that have been pending over the years. Every time they come up with a program, case backlog, clearing case backlog. But man, I can tell you, people who suffer in this judicial system trying to get justice. You go to the ministries, you will find some of us, because we have taken Konohu, you can go and do a land transaction and complete it. But there are people who will move back and forth. So, in short, and in fact, I have even argued here that for me, Uganda, after the overthrow of Obote government and the coming into power of NRM, there was some re-engineering to recreate the institutions of state and reorganize them. That re-engineering was crystallized in the 1995 Constitution, and all that President Museveni and his group have done for the last 25 years is to basically dismantle that constitutional architecture. And almost now, because now I'm doing an amended constitution of Uganda, we're looking at what has been changed and what has been tried. You literally do not have the 1995 constitution as was propagated, because of the things that have been, the dismantling that has happened. So in other words, Uganda is a very, very fragile state as of now, because
But what you're calling the dismantling of the constitution is actually a legal amendment of the document.
No, they are legal amendments, but you see, there was a consensus arrived at through a very, very deliberate and protracted process. And now what you have is the president and the members of parliament sitting and conspiring amongst themselves and changing the entire social contract. And is there a new social contract, for example? Because that would be the fundamental question. If the 1995 Constitution was found to be so imperfect and therefore it has to be turned upside down, are we saying that we now have a new social contract upon which all these institutions can be built and sustained?
Okay, Moses, I'm sure you've been listening to Godber keenly, and what I see is that the institutions we have, but they're weak. Actually, he has given examples of the police, of the military, of the parliament, and that could be a recipe for possible state collapse.
No way. Our military is not a weak institution, none at all. It's a very strong national and patriotic institution in the UPDF. It has managed to keep peace in Uganda, help Congo, DRC, help South Sudan, help in Somalia.
Help Equatorial Guinea.
So we have been around and basically well trained and well equipped to suppress any form of, but also is also guided by, as I've told you, some of the wars were won both at diplomatic and front and military front level. Diplomatic meaning, much as you're fighting, you're also encouraging talking. And those who will talk, we are absorbed.
If you don't talk, we beat you.
Yeah, sure. But you see, the others, for instance, now, if you have been following events in between Israel and the other group is called
and
Hamas, they failed to come to talks. One Friday, let's talk. America has been coming in, you people talk. People say we're not talking. So for us, we have used talking as a tool to bring about peace, and in many cases it has worked. And so if others can learn from us, so that's a very strong, is a strong institution. On the side of the others, the judiciary and what, see, the moment some of them take time. It's not that, when you see these other countries where you will see their constitutions have been there for many years and so on and so forth, but also they have been amended. And I think in some of the countries like America, you see the Data Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, all those amendments have taken place. So the Constitution is never cast in stone. And I can, for Godber, when they say dismantling of the 1995 Constitution, basically they refer to age limit and the term limit.
Are you sure?
Well, I'm talking. This is my opinion. Those are the major things people in opposition or those who don't agree with NRM they raise. But I think it was the first one a mistake to have included some of them in the Constitution. So I don't see anything wrong to correct what you think was wrong. Why am I saying to correct it? If you look at Europe, none has. I'm not aware of a European country which has age limit and term limit. None of them has them. So if you try to borrow from them on that one, then you are wrong. You amend your constitution, you are dismantling it. But see, the rest of the democracy doesn't have it. Similarly,
but maybe they have a different history, and our recent history has been I think the framers thought maybe this would be a safeguard.
But when you're talking about democracy, we talk about histories sometimes don't come in so much because it's about people deciding their future, deciding their leaders in a regular and free fair election. Most of the principles are the same irrespective of the history. Even in America, which has term limits among the major democracies, in the original constitution, they didn't have them. In the original constitution of 1776, they didn't have term limits. Term limits came in when one person, I think was it Roosevelt, had been in power, has been voted for 4 terms. Then if you see in the American system, you can have a president from one party with a majority of, say, in parliament, with their Congress from a different party. So when was he a Democrat was in power at that time, and then the majority in the Congress, what is their parliament, were with different parties, they said, but this man is, if we leave him, we're going to continue and win us again. They amended the Constitution to suit the interest at the time. So when I hear the Godbers here, I told you about, you amended the Constitution to suit him, it has happened in other places.
Okay. Let me give you
Moses, you have a lot of courage.
Professor, I know, Professor, sometimes when we're here, it looks like a lecture room, and the professor has a tendency of looking at the two of you guys. I see him bobbing his head when you guys are making some submission. I'm like, now it's an opportunity for me to learn. Yes, it's an opportunity for me to learn. I see the professor bobbing his head. You guys are
it's an opportunity for me to learn.
Has now picked his lecture notes.
It's an opportunity for me to learn.
Yeah.
Much as we may have weak institutions and the capability of the Ugandan state is wanting in many ways, we are not a fragile state. And maybe one of the reasons we are having challenges in the region is we have fragile states. DRC, Somalia, Chad is nearby.
Is Equatorial Guinea fragile?
Yeah, Equatorial
Sudan,
and even Papua New Guinea.
Sudan Khartoum is now in a pitch of war.
Both Sudans.
Chad, Yemen, Libya, and so on.
So we are all fragile.
No, we are not fragile. But I think the capability of the state is not at the peak, because one of the ways in also testing the state strength is the resilience and agility, to the extent to which it responds to crises, and also when violence becomes illegitimate, which I think that's why Godber is worried that sometimes we tend to believe that violence is legitimate to stabilize the country, whereas we have other means. So, Patrick, I think that looking at institutions first of all, we can separate institutions of the state from institutions of government. Because the government, they are the three, judiciary, executive, and whatever. Then the state, we have the three services, basically. The army, the police, and the prisons. Then the fourth being the public service. And in my view, we have highly developed the military, followed by the public service. Then the police, the prisons and police are slightly behind in terms of the Ugandan situation. So one of the things as a country that we need to do is to give equal attention to the four services and not have preferential treatment to one of the services.
All right. Gentlemen, in the interest of time, each one of you a minute to give your concluding remark, beginning with you, Godber.
No, my concluding remark is to say that this region, I still see a region that is embroiled in perpetual conflict. I think the efforts to build sustainable peace and stability is going to be dependent so much on, one, the quality of the leadership, the leaders of these countries, whether they can be honest with each other and put their people and their countries at the center of the peacemaking agenda. Number two, the different states investing in building and strengthening the institutions of state and government. And then number three, the different states investing in building a competent and a civic competent and civic conscious citizenry that is very active and actually demands for accountability in the way governments run in this region.
Thank you, Godber. Moses, your parting shot, very briefly.
Well, the country is under conflict in the region, although the summit in Nairobi is basically on South Sudan. I think even the others, DRC, Sudan in the north, and others, they need to learn from Uganda, because we have been through it. I think no any other country, even in Africa, has been through it the way Uganda has and is managed and is able now to do well. I was just checking the figures today. In 2023, Uganda exported to Kenya goods worth $1.5 billion, while it imported from Kenya goods worth $900 million. In other words, our trade with Kenya in 2023 was a trade surplus for Uganda. Now, this is a country which had a lot of problems. In the past, it would be the other way around. Kenya selling more to Uganda than Uganda selling to Kenya. But now that has changed because we went through turmoil, but we managed to stabilize the country. And if these brothers of ours can learn from us, then we all prosper together. All right, and Professor, parting shot, very briefly.
The ultimate aim of creating the state is to improve the well-being and opportunities for each and every citizen. This should sink in the heads of those that are in power.
Professor Gerald Karyeija from Uganda Management Institute, Godber Tumushabe from the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies, and Mr. Moses Byaruhyanga, Senior Presidential Advisor. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for your time and for the value you keep adding on this platform. And for you, the listener, I want to thank you for the privilege of your company. Good night and God bless Uganda.